Welcome to another Sunday Superversive Livestream. I am your host, Benjamin Wheeler, here with Anthony Marquetta as always. Today we will be talking about culture and The Shift, which is a movie, I guess that's out recently.
Yes,
Uh,
movie.
I don't know anything about it personally, so I will leave that in your hands. But no, we'll be talking about quite a few far-ranging things. I think you're going to enjoy it today. Anthony,
Yep.
take us away.
So yeah, well, I'll talk about the shift first and get it out of the way, I guess, since you haven't seen it and there's not a whole lot you could contribute then. Though, yeah, there's I'm curious what you would think of it though, actually. Now I am very curious. I really want John C. Wright to watch the movie and review it because I am extremely curious what his review of the film would be. Uh like I think his opinion on it would be fascinating to hear. So, The Shift is a movie put out by Angel Studios. For those who don't know, Angel Studios are the guys who put out The Chosen. They put out the movie about the child sex trafficking. Right, I forget the name of it. Sound of Freedom. That was it. They put out Sound of Freedom. They put out The Chosen. They put out a movie about Abraham and Isaac. So I'm a fan of Angel Studios. I have heard people, particularly for those who are in our circles, you will hopefully recognize who I'm talking about. Big Bear, Owen Benjamin, doesn't trust them. He's gone hard on Tim Ballard, I think, who's the guy that Sound of Freedom is about.
And
I don't know nothing about. What was that? Go ahead.
mostly it's about timing and money and stuff like that. Like if like as a smaller example, if you remember that guy from the bard from Appalachia, whatever his name was,
Oh yeah, that dude. Yep.
randomly shows up, sings one song. He's the darling of all the conservatives. 5 minutes later, he's a dyed in the wool actual videos of him talking about voting for Biden. But, you know, like one of the things that really made Owen pop off about him was that he basically said, "Oh, I can't charge $75 a ticket for coming to see me." But the thing is that this may shock some people, except unless you're like Taylor Swift, the price of a ticket is directly correlated to the price of how much it costs to host the event, plus a cut for the artist. And it's not like it wouldn't, $70 a ticket. In actuality, it costs $60 to $65 to host them and have a full
Hmm.
do of it. So there was a lot of weird stuff that was coming up pretty much immediately, and it's a similar thing but at a grander scale for Angel Studios. Sound of Freedom was put out by weird people and owned by weird people until Angel Studios picked it up, and it
Well,
was
Sound of
distributed.
Freedom. Yeah, Sound of Freedom. I followed pretty closely. So
Yeah,
Here's my only like with Angel Studios, I'm not going to go to bat for or against them for that matter. All I could tell you is that of the stuff that I've seen, it's all been pretty good. Now, I do think they engage in some somewhat shady marketing, but even that, it's like yeah, but also like we're talking about them and then there's Disney and then there's like
right.
all these other companies like okay. And by shady marketing what I mean is they have a thing and I have taken advantage of this, right? Where you can like get free tickets and the free tickets are that other people buy them and then they try and turn all of their movies, literally even The Shift they did this, into like social causes that you buy tickets and then they brag about how many tickets they sold. Now, I agree, believe it or not, with critics who go this is a little bit dishonest and kind of slimy, you know, which like cuz they're not really selling at the rate that they say they're selling. They are, but on the other
Right.
hand, they're also not lying, right? Like it's
To,
not a lie. They're just telling you, "Hey, you should do this and if you think that it's important to get this out to the culture, then do it." But it does strike me as kind of slimy.
I mean,
On the
it's
other
it's
hand,
far less slimy than Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel having sold out theaters. Like
oh
don't get
yeah,
me wrong, like this is a normal tactic.
it is.
But the thing is that while it's a little bit suspicious, I don't think there's any like kill signs. like when the Bard of Appalachia was revealed to be a Biden voter in multiple newscasts that were still on the internet. So it's
Yeah,
there's
I'll be honest,
worrying
I haven't
signs.
even
Then
I've
there's
never heard the man speak. I don't know what his voice sounds like, and I know none of his songs.
good, good.
And which is kind of funny because believe it or not, and I don't know, you're from Missouri, so you could go 50-50 on this, but I actually like country. Uh,
Wow.
so it's not that I wouldn't listen to him in theory, just for whatever reason, I immediately saw the story and I was like, yeah,
It was all
sounds
AstroTurf. All
something's wrong
AstroTurf.
here.
Anyway,
But whatever.
yeah, but
Yeah,
like I
going back
wanted,
to what
yeah,
I get your point though. Just going to what I was saying, I know, like that some people have pointed out red flags with Angel Studios. I don't know nothing about that. All I could tell you is I have seen the films from them and I enjoy them. Right? Like people have tried to make hay out of the Chosen very hard. Always cuz and if you want my amateur opinion here, it's because it feels like something that is too good to be true in my opinion. So people are like searching for a reason that it can't possibly be what it appears to be. You know. Uh like I don't think that the Chosen is crypto Mormon as people have advertised. In terms of Sound of Freedom, I followed it pretty closely and I was willing to I want to be clear that I was willing to condemn Tim Ballard or whatever. And my understanding of Sound of Freedom, the movie, and everything going swirling around it was that Sound of Freedom was a fictionalized but roughly accurate in the important details accounting of events, and that the media, especially Vice magazine, was being unbelievably dishonest. If you want to look at a very good objective look at it, Lore Lodge did a really, really good video on it. And even Lore Lodge, I think, was frankly too negative on Sound of Freedom because they were going like, yeah, the movie sometimes portrays things too negatively. And I'm like, but it's a movie. Like, it's not billing itself as a documentary. It is advertised as a movie. It is sold as a movie. Documentaries and movies are two different things. There's going to be some fictionalization, right? Uh, and I thought it was a pretty good movie. So that's my thought on it. I saw an Abraham and Isaac movie from Angel Studios, and recently they came out with this movie called The Shift. Uh, so I had actually been following The Shift for a while, I want to say years ago, at least months ago. I don't know exactly when. They released the script for The Shift on their website, like in full, the full script. And they also made the one of the opening scenes into a short film. I read the script and I watched the short film. And my opinion of the script at the time was that it was fine, all right. Maybe it would be better in movie form. It's hard to say without actually seeing it in front of you. It didn't blow me away or anything like they were trying to claim that it would. Uh, I actually wasn't even when they announced it was being made into a full movie. I actually wasn't even and I was a little surprised it happened so fast. But I actually wasn't even planning on seeing it until they announced the cast. Now, one thing about The Shift is that the cast of The Shift is really good, like fantastically good. The guy who plays the lead, I had never heard of before in my life. Let me pull it up. He was really, really good, though. Much better than the dude they had playing him in the short film version, Christopher Poleha. But The Shift became a must watch when I realized that the role of the devil would be played by Neil McDonough. Uh, I don't know if you know anything that Neil McDonough's done. He's one of those guys who's like a perennial character actor. Uh, he became somewhat famous. You see him pop up in TV all over the place as the colorful background role, and he always does a really good job in it. So I knew him from Justified season 3. He played the villain, and he was fantastic. So when I saw that he was playing the devil, I said that is a fantastic choice. Fine, I'll watch the movie. And it has Sean Astin, who is a great actor, of course. He was a big role in the film. Uh, it had Paris Patel and Elizabeth Tabish, who are veterans from The Chosen. Paris Patel plays Matthew, and Elizabeth Tabish played Mary Magdalene. They both did a great job in the movie. The only weird one was that there was one role, and I'll get into it when we talk more about it. Uh, there was one role that was like really overacted. John Billingsley played a character named Russo. I've never heard of the guy until this. Apparently, he was a role on Star Trek Enterprise. He
Yeah, I
overacted
remember
his.
him. And he
Oh yeah,
overacted
there you go.
then too.
That's so funny. He's however, it's notable that he stuck out in the film. Like it was really well done, acting wise. So the Shift is a sci-fi take on the Book of Job, and it was an interesting idea. Like the idea is that it's this guy named Kevin. He marries he's a hedge fund manager who loses his job, and he meets a woman named Molly, and they fall in love. And somehow their son either dies or goes missing. It becomes clear later in the film. They leave it intentionally ambiguous early on. Uh, and Kevin gets into a car accident after the death of their son. Him and Molly are clearly not on very good terms with each other at this point. And after the car accident, he meets the devil, who calls himself the benefactor in the movie. And the devil reveals to him that he wants to make him an offer, that there are all of these parallel universes with different versions of Kevin, so him, and that he makes them all the offer to be a shifter, that they keep the peace in other universes by shifting out people with different versions of themselves whenever the devil wants them to in order to keep control. And they get a special device called a shifter that allows them to do this, right? So Kevin says, I don't believe you. So he goes, what do you want me to do? And Kevin says, go ahead and shift that waitress. And he goes, really? He goes, yeah. And he does. And the waitress disappears and the family is crying. So Kevin realizes that now he's in like, this is real and this is really deep stuff. And he starts praying and it causes the devil to disappear. But when he steps outside, he sees that he's been shifted into some sort of dystopian world. Uh, that was at one time controlled by the shifters and the devil, but now it's became news that he's the Kevin that refused. He's the only Kevin in the multiverse that ever refused the devil's offer, and it's caused the benefactor to disappear, and everything is just kind of in chaos. So, and I know I'm explaining this in a lot of detail, but there's a reason. It's a pretty confusing premise if you don't, right? Like, you kind of have to drill down a bit. So, the movie follows 5 years. He's in that world. There's no scripture in the world. So, Kevin is recreating scripture from memory and secretly distributing it. Uh, and there is some sort of like movie theater that allows you to view alternate versions of your life. I know this sounds weird, but think of interdimensional cable from Rick and Morty. Uh that like that's exactly what it is. The interdimensional cable device that allows you to view yourself in other universes from Rick and Morty. That's what it is. And Kevin finds a universe with what he calls his Molly in it, and then he tries to get it back. And then there's like betrayals. He starts shifting between universes, and the story, to fast forward because I don't want to go through the entire detailed plot. The story ends with he has to make a choice of whether he's going to save Tina, who, if you remember, was the waitress who he shifted at the beginning of the movie, or go back to his wife. And he, of course, saves Tina. And then it's a lot of, we'll get into the criticisms in a moment, but a lot of it is not directly stated and more implied. But he then gets shifted into a world where it's not his Molly. It is a version of Molly who's a nurse and a single mother. And it is left ambiguous, by the way, if she's a single mother due to a one night stand or due to widowhood. But because the way she says it is, now it's just me, made me think that maybe the first husband died. I'm not sure. But anyway, and it ends with he ends up marrying her and having more children with her and growing, which is, of course, a reference to the somewhat infamous ending to the Book of Job, uh, where Job gets a new wife and has double the children, right? I think it's a kind. So if you wanted me to say like, well, what does the multiverse stuff have to do with it? I would say that what the multiverse stuff had to do with it was that was probably their idea of how to make that sort of ending of Job work in a sort of satisfying way. Because I think the writer of Job was left with an impossible task with the ending, inevitably, like sort of cause of the book of the structure of the book of Job and the way it works. There is no possible ending that makes you think, well, it's okay that you lost all your children. So he's just kind of like, well, then they doubled. And everybody's like, well, yeah, but what about the original kids? Well, there you go. This is his answer. Like, it's a
They're
multiverse. So,
dead.
yep. Yeah,
Dead.
it's a multiverse or whatever, which I think is fine. So, it's an interesting movie. The number one thing, like I said, is I really want John C. Wright to see it and review it. Because I feel like he would have so much to say about it. And I'd be curious if he thought it was good or bad. My ultimate review of the movie is I think it works a lot more than it doesn't. Overall, I think the film is a success. And mostly what I appreciate about the movie is the ambition. Like, faith-based films just really don't do this. A sci-fi, you know, epic drama spanning years and multiple dimensions with high concepts, right? Like, you just don't see that. And yet, here it is. And with good acting and everything. The lead is fantastic. Neil McDonough is fantastic. All of the side characters, they do a great job. Except, again, I will criticize John Billingsley. He played a character named Russo, who runs like the Rick and Morty alternate universe theater. uh, he played the role extremely over the top, and it was kind of jarring. I thought he stuck out in a bad way, but everybody else was fantastic. Like they really did a great job in all of their roles. Uh, I think there were a lot of really interesting ideas in the film as well, and some really good subtle bits of character work as well. Like, for example, one scene that made me that I thought of later that really stuck out to me as a very cleverly done scene is that at one point, Kevin manages to get his hands on a shifter, but he doesn't know how to use it. So he's just shifting randomly to different worlds. And one of the worlds he ends up shifting to, another version of him is there. And he's there with two other women with who, he's living in some sort of mansion, like living the high life. Almost comes across as like a mafia boss kind of guy. And he sees Kevin there and pulls a gun on him and goes like, and Kevin says to him something like, I don't want, why are you here? Are you trying to take my stuff? This is my, you're in the wrong universe. This is not your universe. And Kevin's like, I don't care about your stuff. I'm just trying to leave. And then he says, hey, wait a minute. Do you have a shifter? And our Kevin goes, yes. Like, I do. I just want to go. And he's like, oh, he goes, no, give it to me. Give it to me or I'll blow your brains out. In retrospect, I think this was a really clever scene to show that, like, even in the universes where Kevin accepted the offer of the devil and was living the high life, they all regretted it, right? Like, they still regretted the decision and were looking for an opportunity to get out of it and switch the universes, right? Like, they've accepted the devil's deal, have gotten everything they've ever wanted, and it's not enough. They want to leave. It's a clever scene because they don't actually say this. It's just shown in the way that Kevin reacts. If there's a negative
That
to the
sounds
film,
fantastic, by the way.
what, the movie or just the idea?
The idea.
Yeah, no, it's a very clever scene because he ends up in the universe. He meets him, and then he goes like, "This is my universe. You're not taking control." And Kevin's like, "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. I'm just trying to leave." And he goes, "Wait a minute." He goes, "You have a shifter with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I have a shifter." And then he pulls his gun on him and goes, "Give it to me." And he's like, "No, I need this." And he goes, "Give it to me, or I'll blow your brains out." And he has to run. Uh, it's such a smart way of showing that the Kevins who accepted the deal and are living the high life regret it, right? Like without telling you. Uh, and there's a lot of good subtle storytelling in there. Like one of the characters, they have a scene where Neil McDonough is a great over the top actor. He's a big scenery chewing type of guy, which is great for a role like this. You're gonna play the devil, you want that sort of energy. And there's a scene where the guy who Evan is smuggling the scripture to is his friend Gabriel, who's played by Sean Astin. And Satan pulls him into the room with Kevin, where when Kevin tries to pull a gun on the devil, which is literally they lampshade this. They're like, "You're gonna pull a gun on the devil," and then he's like, "I don't know. I pinned him against the wall earlier. Why not?" He's like, he physically, as far as I could tell, he does physically exist. So sure, which is interesting because you laugh, but this is actually the climax to Paralandra. Uh, so I guess,
I'm done
yeah,
talking. I will beat the anti Adam to death with my bare hands.
yep. So if you think about it, it's like, wow, that's a really dumb solution. It's like, C.S. Lewis did it. Uh, so in the shift, they have the scene where Gabriel Gabriel is groveling before Satan, who has just showed up for the first time in like 5 years in this universe, and he goes, "I don't know him," and Neil McDonough goes, "Oh," he goes, "No, I really don't know him," and then he just stares at him and goes, "Oh, this is classic. Deny him a third time, just for me." And he's like, I don't know him," and he's like, "See," he goes, "You heard it," which I admit made me laugh, but there's a good, clever bit of storytelling here in that Gabriel has a shifter with him then. Like, Gabriel is killed in the scene, and Kevin grabs his shifter. And you're like, wait a minute, when did Gabriel get a shifter? Like, how does that make sense? And then you realize, if you think over the movie, you realize that, oh, wait a minute. Gabriel was the one who was telling him earlier, shifters can be anyone. They just live in regular society. They don't need to be, right? Like, he was secretly working for him the entire time, is the idea. Uh, and then he starts hunting him through the multiverse. Yeah, if there's a confusing thing about the movie, it's that sometimes cause and effect gets pretty muddled. And you can imagine with a multiverse film, it's like, the way that they explain it is like you make a decision and it splits you into a multiverse, which is a classic way of doing this sort of story, right? But in that case, the idea that you would ever go back to the same universe twice would literally be virtually impossible. And there are times where he finds people who he's seen in another universe, and it's like, okay, how did that happen? Like, how did you manage to do that? That doesn't make any sense. Now, sometimes this is explained in movie as an explicit miracle, like when he's searching for Molly on the Rick and Morty machines, which is how I will always think of them, just the Rick and Morty interdimensional cable machines. Uh, when he's searching for Molly on the interdimensional cable machines, they explicitly say like that the fact that you found her is a miracle, right? Like, okay, fine. But when he's randomly cycling through the multiverse searching for his universe, at one point he finds Tina, who, if you remember, was the waitress who got shifted to another universe and she's in an insane asylum. And it's a pretty harrowing scene. Like she's lost her mind because she's claiming to be from another universe and she's gone from her family and her idea of reality has broken, right? And but then you go like, wait, how did he get here? Yeah, like why in this universe? And when he ends up in the universe with another him in their house, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Why is he in this person's house? How is he here? How does that make sense? And then later too, it's like when the devil leaves for 5 years and comes back, like how did he come back? And why was he gone for 5 years? Well, they don't really explain that. So there's definitely some issues with cause and effect. But overall, like I want to see more movies like this. Just where people make this attempt, to be big and to look for big and to try for big ideas and to really shoot for the moon in terms of like what they can do, because I think when now we have, places like Angel Studios that are finally able to have the budget that you could do something like this. It's time we started to really try. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That Yeah, that's my review of The Shift. I recommend it. It's certainly not perfect. It's very well acted. Uh in terms of people going like, you'll see from mainstream reviews like, oh, it's very it's very ham-fisted and it's messaging, which is not true.
Oh
Uh
no.
yeah, it just isn't like, and I think this comes from the fact that like, Ben knows we've joked about this before, where like the way that I speak and the way that he speaks, um, I would be probably called ham-fisted by a lot of people in terms of like just how I casually drop God into conversations, but that's just turned into my speaking pattern.
Yes.
Like,
It's one of your
it doesn't
best
come across as
qualities.
what was that?
Best qualities, Anthony.
Mm-hmm. There you go. It's just turned into the way that I've spoken about things. Like, you know, having I recall once I was this is a real story. I was on the Jersey Shore, and I was on the phone with Ben for editor talk. Uh and I forget exactly the context of this, but I said something like, well, the good Lord will provide. And I meant it like extremely seriously. And I was talking, in the middle of a long conversation. And some kid walking by me and said and yelled something like, "Yeah, the Lord will provide." Like,
I remember that. It was great. I
you
thought it was
do or
funny.
don't remember?
I do remember.
Yes, it was funny. Don't get me wrong. I don't really begrudge. I was just kind of bemused. Like, oh, I guess it, and I'm like, I guess it probably sounds weird to people who aren't, you know, us. But that's just how I talk. And
Right.
so when I hear people talking like this in the shift, like, having discussions about God and what he can do and if he's listening or whatever, it's like it will sound ham-fisted to somebody who isn't in this world, but for someone like me, I could easily imagine having these exact conversations with someone. You know,
Oh yeah.
it's just not, your perspective changes. Uh, yeah, it's the same thing with like the Jesus Revolution, which was also Angel Studios. And by the way, is the one Angel Studios project I did not particularly like. Uh, even though Matt Frad said that he enjoyed it, but uh, so we're on the out. Now this man that I've never met and doesn't know I exist. We're on the outs. Anyway, uh, yeah, like we when I was watching the Jesus Revolution, it's the same thing where people will be like, "Oh, it's really over the top in the way that they talk about faith." As much as I had my issues with the movie, that was not one of them because it's like, no, I have heard people talk about God in exactly the way that they do in this film, and also it's kind of how I talk about God. So, yeah,
Right.
like how faith changing your life and doing all right, like things like that. Uh, So overall, yeah, that's my review of The Shift. So one of the reasons that we wanted to bring this up in a stream like this, which is like supporting pop culture stream, is that I want to make a point about watching movies in theaters and like, I have heard people say being Christian doesn't mean that you completely withdraw from the culture. And to an extent I agree with this, right? Like,
Right.
I don't think that mean that you should completely withdraw from the culture, but I want to make the point here that I saw The Shift in theaters, right? Like I went to a movie theater and watched this movie. And I'm going to tell you like the last 10 or so movies I've seen in theaters or something like that, like a pretty high number. Like I saw The Wind Rises in theaters, the Miyazaki film, The Wind Rises. They have a Studio Ghibli fest. Uh
Mm-hmm.
I saw Jesus Revolution. I saw the Abraham and Isaac movie. I saw the Chosen series finale. I saw the Chosen opening episodes, right? A bunch of Angel Studios, a couple of anime. I've also seen in the past in theater. I've seen the Konosuba movie in theater, which was very funny, by the way.
It was.
Uh, yes, and Yeah, next week, like literally this Friday, I am going to go see the new Miyazaki film in theaters. How Do You Live, or The Boy and the Heron, if you want to use the horrible American title that for some reason Ghibli insisted on changing it to. I
What?
hate that.
Wait, How Do
I
You
hate.
Live was the original title?
Yes,
Mm, that's amazing.
I think it's. I
Ex-
think it's a much better title.
like, one of the strengths. So I'm going to go off on a tangent here for just a second. One of the biggest strengths of Japanese authors is just their immaculate titling of their novels. Like the fisherman who fell out of grace of the sea. Hold on, like Sun and Steel. Uh, Let me look up who's that author that Vox likes. Uh,
China Mieville.
no, I like China Mayville too, but City and the City is a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. Um, but I don't think he's moved from strength to strength. But we're not going to talk about him today. Hold on, I gotta pull this
I
up.
don't know who you're talking. I actually do not know who you're referencing.
Okay, it's so hold on. Yukio Mishima, Confessions of a Mask, Thirst for Love, Death in Midsummer, The Sound of Waves, The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea, uh, and then let's see here. Oh, Haruki Murakami, um, Hard Boiled
Murakami.
Wonderland,
Okay.
at the end
Yeah.
and the end of the world. Dance, 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 South of the Border, West of the Sun, Sputnik, Sweetheart. That's a 10 out of 10 name. But so it's like it's all right. It's okay. I just get
And it's
angry about book cut titles.
you're right. And it's Studio Ghibli that insisted on changing it too. Like they were the ones who said for a foreign audience, we're gonna. One of the reasons I like the original title so much is that if you've watched The Wind Rises, which by the way, if you haven't, you should. I love The Wind Rises. It's one of my favorite movies. But if you've watched The Wind Rises, the title of that movie comes from a poem, which is the wind, and one of the lines in that poem is "The wind is rising, we must try to live." Right? So
Yes.
The Wind Rises is made, and it ends with Jiro, the main character, deciding that he needs to try and live, and that's the end of the movie. Which, by the way, is an ending that Miyazaki came to conclude was necessary after much personal struggle. Right? Like, there's a
Right.
great documentary on this called "The Kingdom of Dreams and Madness." The original ending had Jiro die at the end. Like, there's a
Right.
dream sequence at the end of the movie where Nahoko comes in and in the movie as released, she tells him live, and he does, and he goes back, and that's how the movie ends. The
Right.
original draft of the film, according to Miyazaki, like very late in the game too, she
Yeah.
told him to come with her, and he died.
Like it's like
So,
the Japanese ideal of a story ending with suicide.
mhm. And I think it's a testament to Miyazaki's genius that he quite correctly realized that that ending it just doesn't work,
Right.
right? Like, and it's one of the many reasons I absolutely love The Wind Rises. I think the ending is pitch perfect. Uh, but How Do You Live is such a great follow up title, right?
Yes.
Because it's "The wind is rising, we must try to live," and Jiro Horikoshi goes to live. But now that leaves you with the question of how do you live, right? And that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what the next movie is about. How do you live? So to change that title is just so irritating to me. It really annoys me.
He must have been like the Gaijin will not understand my vision. We shall dumb it down for them.
Yes. Also, by the way, I really do love Miyazaki. He's such a uh he's such a jerk, but he's also so honest in like how he expresses everything that I love it.
Right.
Like I read a little he made a short statement like when he released the film where he's like, is there anything more pathetic and lonesome than somebody who says that they're going to retire but comes out of retirement when they're past their prime and have nothing to contribute? He's like, I don't think there is, yet here I am. He's like, this is a pathetic attempt at a movie. I hate it. He's like, anyway, I hope you all enjoy it. It's like, thank you.
He's like,
Uh
sitting there waiting to die. I've lost all my touch. I am a worthless person. Enjoy.
Yeah. It's like, anyway, enjoy the film. Just stands there. I'm just imagining him like you have an audience there watching. Miyazaki comes out to address them before the film. He's like, I'm a worthless worm. I should not have made this movie. I have lost my touch. And and I really have nothing more to contribute to this life. But I'm so weak that I couldn't bring myself to admit that I had nothing left, and here we are. Anyway, enjoy the film. And then he just sits down.
And the people start cheering, and he hates them a little bit more.
uh yeah. So I am very much looking forward to How Do You Live?
Sounds great. Uh,
But my point being that I make a point of saying that I went to the theater to see all of this. There's a new Godzilla movie that came out from Japan. Looks like both audiences and critics enjoy it. For whatever critics enjoying it is worth, which is nothing at all. But at this point, not that I think so. Here's the thing: I don't trust audience reviews, but I don't actively distrust them. I actively distrust critic reviews.
right.
So,
You gotta.
but apparently there is some overlap here, which makes me at least go, "Hey, maybe I should try it." You know. So there's the new Godzilla. This is a foreign film. I am going to see all of these movies, talking about them on air here, discussing them, having conversations about them with other people, and I'm not supporting Hollywood. Like, I am not giving the money to Hollywood. I'm giving the money to support these projects. If I'm giving the money at all.
Mm.
I don't think that we are obligated to support these projects. Now, recently I started watching for the first time the Netflix One Piece, the live action One Piece, which seems to now I don't have Netflix. I would not get Netflix. I do have a relative who has Netflix who allowed me to use it to watch this. Even as I told him to drop Netflix, I said, "But if you're not going to, can I use it?" And he's like, "Sure." Uh, I think now, to be clear, I would rather him drop Netflix than me continue to watch the show. My values are in that order. Uh, Nevertheless, we need to make a point here that don't give money to people. This idea that living in the world will involve no sacrifice from good Christians is wrong, right? Of course, there's going to be some level of sacrifice,
Yep.
right? However, this is a very, very basic thing. You're not sacrificing a lot by not watching the latest Marvel movie, by not watching Netflix, right?
Right.
By not engaging in the cultural discussion. What exactly is it that you think, like, oh, we can't retreat from this? Really? You can't? You need to give money to people who hate you in these circumstances. There's no way for you to not to. Like, what's going to happen? Will you die? Will you lose your job? Will you. What? No. I just wouldn't be able to talk about things with my friends. Uh, that's it? Like, like, that's the thing that is making you go, no, I gotta pay the people who actively despise me, who are hurting the culture, right? Like,
Right.
it's an attitude that sometimes I hear that kind of bothers me. And
Oh, it bothers me too, because it's like, that means that they're spending time on their thing, that they paid some sweatshop workers and an AI consultant, uh, you know, more money than I'll ever see in my life, and here we are struggling with Pinkerton's Ghost with a subscribe star. Wink. I'll just put it in the comments right there.
yep, yep,
And it's like you, seeing these people paying their entertainment, and it's very frustrating to kind of talk to them about it because, like, eventually they just kind of know you're the weird guy who doesn't participate in culture. And good job, Caitlin, not supporting Hollywood at all. Uh,
Mhm.
like, and it's easy to do it in the end, but it's hard socially. Like recently, I was standing at the door to my bouncing job, and I was scanning IDs, and it's like, is that an Android phone? Ooh. And I said, I told these two that they had no power over me. Um, so on and so forth. And I'm G rating my words over here. Uh, but, essentially they valued my existence based on whether or not I had an an iPhone. Um, and of course, the correct thing would have been to have an iPhone. And it's like, yeah, those people are literally that shallow that they care what sort of phone you have. Dump him if he doesn't have an iPhone made the rounds on Twitter and TikTok. Um, you just can't be seen with an Android phone, don't you know? Sixes and sevens, and fives too, I guess. Uh, so it's there. These people literally do care about this stuff more than religion, because it is their religion. It's the pop cult. There's this video that went around of this woman shaking and crying as she opened the new iPhone. And somebody, Zero HP Lovecraft, commented, and I think he has the right of it, that this was essentially a religious ecstasy for her as she's, weeping and crying, opening up the wrapper one step at a time, pulling out an Ugg boot, pulling out an Ugg boot, picking up the cell phone, like, this is their god. And for men, it's like, the video games, the soy face. Quite frankly, for weeping and crying over an Ugg boot, the soy face over uh, toy figure or something like that, or a trailer. That guy weeping over uh, that one Star Wars trailer. That's the exact same thing. It wasn't, emotions. It was, this strange religious ecstasy that overcame them. Hmm.
Yeah, it's this pop culture's identification with, like we call it the pop cult, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. This identification of pop culture with religious belief is creepy, and you see it with sports as well. They're making it very explicit with sports. I just saw like either a documentary or a show coming out where it was literally like, how sports is our religion or whatever. Now, once again, I actually like sports, right? I watch it regularly. I'm a fan of hockey. I'm a fan of baseball. I'm a fan of football. I watch all three sports fairly regularly. I'm going to be going to a hockey game next year. You know,
Ooh.
uh, it's gonna be fun. I like NHL hockey. I don't like NBA basketball for whatever reason. Uh, I've just never gotten into it. But anyway, this idea of, and I do think that sports is able to create really meaningful experiences in a sense, in the same way that as an author, I obviously believe that fiction can create really meaningful experiences, right?
Yep.
Like, of course, I would not discount that. That would be ridiculous. But it's not religion. Yeah,
Yep.
like they're just simply two different things. You could have a meaningful experience that is not necessarily a religious experience. There are
Yeah.
moments from books I remember reading when I was younger to this day, and I wouldn't call it identical to a religious experience. For example, uh, Madeline L'Engle, the author of A Wrinkle in Time, she wrote the in one of her sequel books, A Wind in the Door. I remember to this day the climax of that book involved Meg, the main character, didn't get along with her principal, and they had to go inside Charles Wallace's body to take out like evil mitochondria. I'm not even kidding. This is the plot of the story. Uh,
She gets
it,
pretty wild after the first book.
she does, and the first book is pretty wild. Uh, it's probably I wouldn't say it's the least wild of the four. The least wild of the four is Many Waters,
Yes.
but it's definitely not the most wild of the four. Uh, anyway, in A Wind in the Door, I remember a moment at the end of that book where they needed to save the principal, but Meg needed to love him, and Prague and Prague, the cherubim, is there, and she's like, but I don't like him. It's like, who? And he basically says, "Who cares? I don't even have emotions, and I love you." And Meg has this realization, like, oh wait, love isn't an emotion. And I remember like young elementary to middle grade me reading this, and it blew my mind at the time, right? Like,
Yeah.
I had never considered that idea. And it is completely correct, by the way.
Yep.
Like, love isn't an emotion. Love is willing the good of another, even above yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what love is. It does not require you to like someone. It does not require you to have any positive feelings towards them whatsoever. It's just willing their good, even at the expense of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that blew my mind though when I read it. I'd never thought of that before, and I remember that to this day. It wasn't but like A Wrinkle in Time and Madeline L'Engle was not my religion. And yet, I feel like Harry Potter did become the religion for a lot of people. This is what happened in the wake of J.K. Rowling ending up being, in many ways, a terrible person, right?
Yes.
Like, so here's the thing about I don't agree with the right wing attempt, uh, with the right wing attempt to try and like reclaim J.K. Rowling, right?
Right.
I don't agree with that. Uh, and part of the reason I don't agree with that is because Rowling wasn't like people forget this now because she's now on the outs with them. But Rowling was an SJW, like she was a social justice warrior. She was very into like left wing causes, bad mouthing the right wing. Harry Potter's not for you if you don't support left wing cause of the day, right? Uh, And then all of a sudden, as it turns out, she did not go completely into the most insane of all of the leftist positions as of now, because pedophilia still hasn't quite become acceptable to advocate for yet, which it will.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, that
They tr-
absolutely will happen.
they try
Uh,
to make a serious call about once a year or so. And
right.
I don't mean
They
just
test the
like
waters.
one article. I mean like multiple articles. Somebody famous gets interviewed. They bring up
Yeah.
Polanski.
They test the waters, and then every year everybody just gets disgusted, and then they back off a bit, and then they test it again a year later. We're still not there. So right now, the most the most insane thing that has become accepted by the left currently is transgenderism. Uh, and Rowling wasn't willing to go there, which is literally like the bare minimum. Like, I'm sorry, I hate to say this, but it takes no courage to be against transgenderism. It takes like a half functioning brain. It is so dead on obviously wrong. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you need to be lying to yourself in some extremely fundamental way to even pretend to accept it. Like you need to be a person who has given into the culture in a way that is extremely disturbing, or you have severe mental issues, which most actual transgender people have, right?
Yep.
Gender dysphoria. Um, so this fact that like, oh, she took the stand on transgenderism, she's one of us. No, she's not one of us. She's just not so completely insane that she is willing to give up the most obvious of obvious positions, right? Like
Right.
there is nothing brave about this, especially because she is richer than Midas and literally lost nothing as a result of this. Like that's the other thing. It's like, oh, she suffered. She didn't suffer anything. HBO was making a show based on Harry Potter. They had a video game based on her work. It sold like crazy. She did not suffer at all.
Right.
And that's because she reached a level of wealth and power that, frankly, like is accessible to literally none of us and never will be. Uh, and you could talk about why all you want, but the fact is she's there. So she could just choose to ignore how people treated her, and that's exactly what she did. because they couldn't hurt her. And also, Harry Potter, even to this day, that's the other thing too. Like this idea that Harry Potter as a property suffered because of this is fake. It's not true. Harry Potter as a property didn't suffer at all, and the Harry Potter video game that recently came out is very good proof of this. Harry Potter is just as popular as it ever was.
Yep.
Uh, like the reason that the last Fantastic Beasts movie didn't do good isn't because Harry Potter isn't popular. It's because the movie was bad. So I've heard. I didn't see it, but I watched some very funny reviews of it.
I mean, the
Uh,
first one wasn't that great either.
I liked the first one. Like, you're right, it wasn't great, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I liked the characters, and I liked the animals, and I liked those scenes.
It
I thought the
was,
larger plot wasn't
and
very well done.
it was an incredibly thinly veiled uh, thing about homosexuals and religious households.
Yeah, that was the larger plot. That was not, and that was lame. I liked, basically, I liked it whenever it wasn't talking about that at all. Yeah,
Okay.
and everything else I liked, I didn't like. But you're right. Like that was
Yeah.
not the point. Is that series was never going to go anywhere. Like I'm not even, you know, not worth arguing over.
Sure.
Uh, and, however, the original Harry Potter series is just as popular as it ever was. That HBO series that's going to come out, that's gonna sell like crazy.
Yep.
Like it will do incredibly well. Uh,
Religious ecstasy all round.
exactly. And the thing about Rowling too, like that's one of the reasons that the SJWs turned so hard on her, is she was literally like a religious prophet to them,
Yep.
and she ended up like, it's like learning, that Joseph Smith was actually a bad person, which is genuinely an experience that Mormons come to all the time, and many, many, many times they will just lose faith in God completely, right? Like
Right.
this is not uncommon. In fact, it's probably more common than them going to another religion, you know, or
Yeah.
more common, sorry, than them going to another religion. Because if you think, and like I have a lot of sympathy for that too, because like when you realize that everybody around you is either lying to you or has been deeply misled by a charlatan their entire life, and that's all you know of religious belief. Well, I would be skeptical of religious belief at that point too, as a whole, right? Like,
Yeah.
how could you not be? Uh, Rolling not being in total lockstep on all things SJW was like that for them. It was their prophet turning out to, you know, not be a good person. Uh, and that's why I very strongly disagree with people who say things like, "Oh, as long as your kids are reading, I support it. It doesn't matter what they read. At least they're reading." I hate that saying. At least they're
Yep.
reading. Like, what do you mean? Like, at least they're reading. So if they were reading Mein Kampf, you would be okay with it? Like, that's clearly not true. You don't actually believe that. Nobody does. It's one of those things where, like, obviously nobody actually believes it. We're just quibbling on what is and isn't acceptable.
Right.
You know.
It's kind
Um,
of like when people freak out when I start talking about Bernays in advertising. It's like, no, like they deliberately use ugly people just like they deliberately used pretty people back in the day when advertising was, important.
hmm Yeah, you're exactly right. Uh, it's yeah. In terms of that, that's also one of the reasons I'm not anti censorship. Like per se, I'm not anti the idea of saying there are things that people shouldn't be reading. And once again, nobody actually is, right?
Hmm.
Like really nobody is. Uh because if you go, okay, so should we have pornography in schools? Well, no, that's different. Oh, okay, so you do have a line, right?
Yep.
Or as I like to point out to people, J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter is pro censorship. This is a plot line in the story. She is explicitly pro censorship.
Yep.
Harry looks, and this is a thing. Harry is looking for information on Horcruxes, which is like you store your soul in another object, right? Uh, However, the Hogwarts library does not carry any books on Horcruxes, so Voldemort needs to get information on Horcruxes by asking a teacher directly. And the teacher tells him, and then this is explained as like the origin of why Voldemort started killing people and turning his soul into objects that they need to go around and collect in the last book. In other words, Rowling believes that creating Horcruxes is so disturbing and evil that children shouldn't be allowed to view it.
Yeah.
So clearly the concept of censorship per se is absolutely not I'm trying to think of how to put it. Like it
It's not
everybody
something that
acknowledges it.
she's against as much
And it's
as
not something that anyone's against.
right.
The other thing too is that like I always hate the banned books thing that comes up every year
Right.
because it's almost never the case that any of those books are ever banned.
Right.
Right? Like none of those books have been are banned. They call them banned books when in reality what they mean is a parent did not want their children reading it. And
Right.
many times they had excellent reasons for it,
Yep.
which is a completely different thing than banning a book.
Right. There's like, I can think of many banned books off the top of my head that are banned and banned for a reason. You brought up Mein Kampf. Uh, One of the ones that really gets brought up a lot is Siege by, I think, Covington, who was a white nationalist up in the Pacific Northwest version. Like a lot of the Cascadia memes come from those guys. Um, uh, so he and it like it's got all the usual things. They say the N word. There's a lot of murder and stuff like that. And like I said, he was a white supremacist uh, in the Pacific Northwest of all places. Um, I think the Pacific Northwest is lost territory, except where Owen Benjamin becomes king. I'm looking forward to that. A
Yes.
6'10" king, please, yes. All that height and a crown on top. He'll be like 7 feet in the end, Anthony. That's all I want. Um, but it also has an incredible demonstration of how an organized elite can take control of a situation and keep power through and rule like 90% of a population because elite theory is correct and populist theory is wrong. Um, you do it by murdering feds. You fed post all the time. If someone infiltrates and sells you out, you kill them. Like there's a whole bunch of things that's demonstrated in this book that is real world tactics to a point. The dude is way more bloody minded than the real world allows, but it's a fiction book. Uh, but basically the book demonstrates how these tactics would be used. What to do when some kids want to do a revenge killing that's politically, acceptable for your side to do. What do you want to do with this? What do you want to do with that? What happens when you actually face somebody competent? What happens when you're in enemy territory? Like there's the reason why this book is banned isn't because the guy's a racist. The reason why the book is banned is because it's a handbook and manual on small time tactics to overthrow a government with practical demonstrations, which I can say, except for one point when he talks about propaganda by using the characters in the story to go through things, uh, is pretty down to earth. I read it way back when, and I could say that everything in it was basically possible. Um, and this is some crazy guy with a radio program up in the Pacific Northwest. This isn't a serious person. Cascadia isn't a serious idea. Uh, but I see why that book's banned. I understand entirely why that book's banned. Any smart kid could take that book and completely revolutionize his elementary school, his grade school, his high school, whatever. and nobody could stop them. You know, like they would have to basically lock down an entire high school's worth of kids and, you know, root them out. So you look at that stuff, you know, legitimately banned uh, for very obvious reasons, though quite frankly,
Mm-hmm.
not the reasons why everyone says it is. And yeah, you know, but the thing is, they're not saying read Siege. They're saying, you know, you guys should read To Kill a Mockingbird or what's another one? Catcher in the Rye or this or that. And it's never books of high culture, though even I enjoy To Kill a Mockingbird. You know, it's never the Iliad, it's never the Odyssey, it's never books that would actually make a man a man. You know, if you read it and you go, yes, I see myself in Achilles, yes, I see myself in Hector or
Yeah,
Odysseus.
To Kill a Mockingbird is an okay book. I tend to agree with what Flannery O'Connor said about it. She famously said, you know, she's like, oh, To Kill a Mockingbird. They asked her about it, and she's like, "It's all right. I just don't know why everybody's making such a big deal out of a children's book."
Yeah,
Yeah, and I agree with her. To Kill a Mockingbird is very nice. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like, it is
yeah.
a very nice story. I wish it were true. Yeah.
Yep.
Uh, if you want an actually ingenious take on race relations, read Flannery O'Connor's short story "Everything That Rises Must Converge," which is prophetic. Like, she portrays an SJW in that story with an absolutely uncanny accuracy. Like, it's disturbingly dead on.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry. Continue with where you were.
No, but like, you know, like you see where I'm saying like the difference between uh books worth banning and books that aren't actually banned. Like if you can like I would be utterly shocked if there was an actual bookstore where you could buy Mein Kampf or Siege or whatever outside of weird conventions. And probably, quite frankly, probably also run by a Fed who's looking to get your card information or fingerprints on your money or whatever you have. Um, you know, like, but on the other hand, you can buy To Kill a Mockingbird and Catcher in the Rye and other things like that at every bookstore. In fact, I would even say that unless the bookstore is specialized, it is more unlikely to not have one of those banned books there. In fact, they might even go out of their way to have them than it would be to, you know, anything else. Like you're gonna find these books in those bookstores. They'll have their own little banned books table, you know, and to me it's very much you know sort of a sign of the fakeness of the culture that we're surrounded by. You know, like it's like they don't understand, they don't care, they don't think deeply about this. Just like they don't think deeply about what type of you know phone they use. You know, it's just whatever's popular, whatever's socially acceptable. You know, Miley Cyrus has an iPhone. I will have an iPhone too.
Hmm. And it's one of those things too, where like I remember when the book Mouse. So that's some sort of graphic novel about the Holocaust where they represent people as mice, whatever. Don't care, never read it. I'm sure it's fine. Uh,
I
I
tried
don't know
reading it.
any.
It's very boring.
I don't know anything about the creator or the book except the basic premise. So like to be clear, I have nothing bad to say about him. Perhaps I desert. He should have something bad said about him, but I don't have anything. Anyway, they were advertising like, "Oh, Mouse was banned from a school." Like, and I immediately said, "That's not true. I know that's not true. I don't believe that that's true." Uh, and I looked at this is before reading the story, looked into it, and what actually happened is that a school wanted to take Mouse off of its curriculum for the year. This happens every year with books at a school. Like, that has nothing to do with it being banned or not. Even if I don't even think they removed the book from the school library, but even if they did, that's also not banning.
Yep.
That's not keeping a book in the school library, right? That's
Yep.
not banning a book.
Yep.
To ban a book would mean that you were not allowed to own it, which is a school can't do that. Like, schools can't make owning your own private books illegal. Schools can't ban books. Like, the very idea of a school banned a book is not true. Did not make it part of the curriculum is a completely different thing,
Yep.
and frankly not related. You know, but like the creator of Mouse is like, this is why we need to do it. Now, this gets into, I've had this conversation before, and it always sometimes it horrifies people, and sometimes people are like, yes, thank you. Uh Whenever I talk about the Holocaust, like, I had to go through in middle school to high school like 3 or 4 different units on the Holocaust, and
Ugh.
I hear never forget all the time. And my whole thing is like, never forget what? I didn't do this. Like, what do you mean never forget? Like,
Careful,
what
Anthony.
am I
Careful.
remembering? What's up? Careful.
There might be a commissar listening. You never know.
Oh, come on, you know that. You know that if they were listening, we'd already be in jail.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Well, it's like
yeah,
similarly, it's like sure, I went to a Holocaust survivor talking about it. She didn't go to any of the crazy camps. Yeah, me and my sister were like 5 at the time. We got rounded up, and mom died of disease, and we were in this factory the entire time. Like it was like one of the work camps, and yeah, that's pretty horrible. I'm sorry that happened to you, but yeah, I'm not responsible either.
right. Like, it's just a really weird thing where it's like, not only was I specifically not responsible, nor anyone in my family, America was not responsible for the Holocaust. Like, we just weren't. We had nothing to do with it.
Mm,
And I know this because everybody brings up that one time America wouldn't take a single refugee boat, because that's the worst thing that America did in regards to the Holocaust. Like, there's nothing else you could point to except, like, yeah, we might have saved like what, 100 people.
right.
Uh, I mean, I guess that's too bad for them. I feel bad for you, but also we're not the ones that did it. We had nothing to do with it.
Yep.
In fact, if you want to give us credit for anything, we liberated the camps. So you're
Yep.
welcome.
And
Like,
there's plenty
it,
of evidence that those death camps that Stalin took were in fact just work camps before the Soviets got there. So just gonna lay that out.
it's just a weird. I mean, yeah. No, it's just a
Eli
weird
Wiesel
thing. Like,
denied some things later in his life. It's like, well, it's
yes,
only
I know.
metaphorically true, and I'm like, you mother.
No, well, here's the thing about Night. Night is actually like, it is well known that Night is not historically accurate, and in
I
fact,
didn't know that.
many places, like many places, were classing Night as a fictional book.
Really?
Weasel denied it, but there's so many obvious glaring inaccuracies in Night that you pretty much can't take it as straight history.
Well,
Uh
nobody told me, and it makes me
oh yeah,
sad.
don't get me wrong. It is that people try and memory hole it, but whatever. This is neither here nor there. My point in all of this, yeah, man, this is really this conversation.
We're talking about censorship, Anthony. We would have
Yes,
to
I know.
bring it up
It's so
eventually.
funny.
The
No,
now the
but
qu-
my point, my main point, yeah, I don't know. I told them about the Holocaust and they got so mad at me. You'd think they'd be happy to know that 6 million Jews didn't die. What? No. Uh,
horrible.
I. It's one of my favorite jokes, though. Uh, to be clear, yes, I do think that the Holocaust happened, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean it happened.
Anyway, yes. uh, anyway, not my point. Uh, what I was getting at is like the weird obsession in the United States with the Holocaust has always been very strange to me. Because this idea of never forget has always been like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be remembering. Because America's like, oh, but we need to never do this again. It's like, what do you mean never again? We didn't do it in the first place.
We
Like,
did it to Indians instead, Native American. No, I'm kidding. We did we
and we sort of, but also no, not really.
Yeah, I know.
the thing about the Indians is that the reason for the massive demographic collapse of the Indians was disease, which, contrary to popular belief, no, that was not intentional.
Yep.
Uh, it just was a stroke of extremely poor luck that we gave them diseases and they did not give us diseases.
Yeah.
I genuinely do not know why. I've never
They gave
really
us
thought of that.
syphilis.
Yeah, that's true. But you get what I mean,
I do.
right? Like
I'm giving you
demographic
grief at this
collapse.
point
Hmm.
because if this live stream lasts more than a week, I'd be shocked.
Demographic collapse, syphilis. So no, we. Uh, with that said, in my research into it, no, I do not support Andrew Jackson's removal of the Indians. Right, like that
Right.
was. I do think that that was a crime against humanity. Uh,
I do support his attempt to break the bank. Yeah, boy. Old
sure,
Hickory.
eh, sure. Uh, but I don't. Yeah, no, I can't defend the whole Trail of Tears thing. I do think it was about as bad, with as people said. The reason though for the massive demographic collapse of the Indians was mostly just incredibly bad luck.
Mm.
Now, that's not to say that we treated them well. I don't think we did. Again, like I think that the Trail of Tears and Jackson's policy was awful, but we did not cause them to completely disintegrate as a nation. Disease did
Yep.
primarily.
Primarily.
This is a vast oversimplification, but that's the thing. All accounts of like Native Americans or American Indians, because we're not woke here. You know, of American of the Red Indians. What? Uh, yeah, of uh of American Indians. Like all accounts of what happened to the American Indians are vastly oversimplified in popular culture. Right? In
Yep.
reality, it was like a series of engagements, and the massive demographic loss was due to disease, which was not
Mm-hmm.
caused by us. In some cases we acted dishonorably, in some cases they acted dishonorably, in some cases we were in the wrong, in some cases they were in the wrong. However, when push came to shove at the end of it all, we were the ones who did force them to move their peoples over vast amounts of lands because we defeated them in combat, and yes, I do consider that wrong. So sorry if that makes me makes me left wing. You know. Uh, but yeah, that's my take on it. But this got very far afield of the original idea, which is how we can interact with pop culture and what we should be interacting with. Which, on that subject, have you seen Andor at all?
No.
So Andor is like on the list as that one good Star Wars show. Uh, now, on one hand, in order to legally watch it, you need to have Disney Plus, which obviously, like, if for the record, if you have Disney Plus, what are you doing? Get rid of it. Uh,
Yep.
right? Like, come on, are you kidding me? Disney Plus. Uh, on the other hand, I have heard from like Critical Drinker and Mauler and like, basically every critic who I actually have any amount of legitimate respect for that Andor is actually really good. So I did try it, and my thought on and no, by the way, I did try it, and no, I do not have Disney Plus. Make of that what you will. Anyway, uh
You know
I
what?
thought that
You taking off Disney after everything else, you're a crazy man, Anthony. A revolutionary.
man, that Holocaust discussion though. Yeah. Yeah, Bradford Walker says the mouse can accidentally do watchable stuff. Accidentally, still won't give them money or time. Uh, well,
Yeah.
describe give them, right? Let's just say that I am not giving them anything of mine. Uh, so anyway, I thought that the first episode moved kind of slowly, but it is notable to watch as a sort of contrast to how Disney Star Wars just does everything wrong. Here's the other thing I want to discuss with you. This is a good segue into it, though. Like, I am not sure if the average person necessarily realizes just how bad, uh, just how bad Disney's year was.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking, this was one of the single worst years for a business, ever. They released, to give you an idea, Disney released 13 movies, I believe, this year. Uh, 11 of them bombed. Not just failed, catastrophically failed. I think
Yep.
either two or three of them lost over $100 million.
Wish
Like,
certainly did.
yeah, Wish, Indiana Jones 5.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yep. And there was something else. I swear there was a third. Oh yeah, the Marvels.
Yeah.
Yep. So three of their films lost over $100 million. I want you to think about this for a moment, where you go Kathleen Kennedy is still working for Disney, right?
Right.
That is uh, think about that for a moment. That is insane. 11 of 13 movies, all of their shows have bombed spectacularly because streaming does not make money and never has, which is another thing that people don't understand. Streaming is a Ponzi scheme that they sell people on this idea that in the future it will one day make money, when in reality, streaming has never made money.
Yep.
I would not. My prediction is that Disney Plus is going to be shut down by the end of 2024. Uh,
Ooh.
it's bleeding money, bleeding money. And here's the thing,
So is the U.S. government.
uh, yeah, the analogies are better than you think. Uh, But here's the thing, like here's the analogy I was making in a conversation with family. They said how do you track when Rome actually fell? It's harder than you think, right?
Sure.
It's
But
even hard. You
yeah.
can make the argument that Rome never fully fell, right?
I mean, it
Where
fell in 1921 when the Tsar was shot.
Mhm. You could say that. Uh, you could say that the Republic of Turkey is currently the valid
Never.
continuation of the Roman Empire. What?
Never.
You could say that it ended when Karl the First von Habsburg of Austria renounced his claim to the throne. Uh, right? Seriously, there are
Yeah.
many things you could talk about how when Odoacer took over Rome, except that doesn't really work because the emperor was still alive, and Odoacer was even tacitly saying that he was under his allegiance. Now he wasn't, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But he was claiming to be. And you could say then, well, okay, but after that point, right? Well, here's the thing, the Holy Roman Empire, to go, oh, it wasn't Rome, right? But
Yes,
in a
it
sense, it
was.
was.
Voltaire was just, sour grapes.
No, I get it, but in a sense, it was because the entire administrative structure of the Roman Empire, was now under their control. And of course, you had the Eastern Roman Empire, which lasted for another 1,000 years, I
Yep.
think it was, after Rome fell, and was arguably more successful. They had a
Mm,
historic continuity with Rome, arguably.
yeah.
Uh, they had historic continuity with Rome. They had an emperor who was the Roman emperor. At one point, they even controlled Rome when
Yep.
Justinian took it back over.
So
What's up?
hold on. Let me break down the years that or the events that you could call the death of the Western Roman Empire, or the
Go
death
ahead.
of Rome. When Theodosius the quote unquote great, he was not a great, he was a soy jack, uh, broke the Eastern and Western Roman in half. The next major event has sort of two parts to it. The spiritual death of the Western Roman Empire was when Majorian was murdered along with, I think, Leo and others, Leo the Pope. But it really died when Romulus Augustulus was deposed. Not even murdered. Odoacer just kicked him out, and he's like, I killed your dad. He made you puppet, and now I'm puppeteer, and I don't need you." I will say that Odoacer even though the year that he did this is fuzzy, when he returned the Western regalia to Eastern Roman Empire, that is the true death of the Western Roman Empire. You could say that it was in 480 when. So if you were to ask me directly which one it was when Odoacer rejected the imperial regalia and returned it to the Eastern Roman Empire. Whatever date that was. No one actually knows. They just know he did it. When Julius Nepos, who was deposed for Romulus Augustulus, was murdered in 480. Then you have when. So that's like, those are the dates when you could say the Western Roman Empire died. When the empire itself died, you could say that it was a slow transformation from Roman to Byzantine that happened over the course of about 200 years, and probably the Western idea of Rome has its last gasp under Justinian the Great, and was lost immediately, mostly immediately by his successors. You could also say that it was the war with the Sassanids, the final war, where not Heraclius basically had to transform every part of the Byzantine state to fight total war between uh, Byzantium and the revived Sassanid Empire. You could say that the Byzantine Empire fell at the sack of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade. You could say that it fell when Constantine Palaiologos the 11th, if I'm recalling correctly, uh, died in the defense of the city in 1476. But even then, you could legitimately say that the Ottoman Sultanate was empire was the successor to Rome by conquest. But you could also make the argument that because the rulers of Tsarist Russia were part of the bloodline of certain emperors, multiple emperors, in fact, you could say that they're also a continuation. And both those political entities took Roman references and, as implying that they were the Roman successor states, into their list of titles. Um, you do have Turkey's claims, which, quite frankly, I dismiss out of hand. Not because I am particularly racist to the Turk, but because they are not an empire, they are not a kingdom. Uh, you
Oh yeah.
have to
On the
have.
other hand, counter argument: Rome was a republic first.
Yeah, it's not a republic either. Uh, but here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. Here's the ultimate argument. I've ignored the Holy Roman Empire for a reason, and that reason is because other states with better claims to it existed, uh, and namely the Byzantine Empire, and arguably Ottoman Empire and Tsarist Russia. Sorry to say that, HRE fans. Ben is not a big supporter, even though he thinks Voltaire is a nerd. Um, I would actually say that the Roman Empire has not fallen because the Roman Catholic Church still exists.
Yeah, that's I think John C. Wright made that argument as well. So, all of this is to say, the reason that I brought this up was not because I enjoy the historical tangents. I do. However, that is not why I brought it
You're
up.
hearing Ben
Uh,
call the Roman Catholic Church the Roman Empire, and it's like, oh, I
yeah, that
didn't
too.
know.
Uh, no, the real reason that I brought this up was to make an analogy with like Disney and the death of Disney. Because my point is, people going like, how can Disney turn this around? And my answer is they can't.
Yep,
And I don't mean they can't in a philosophical way, like, oh, because they won't drive. No, I mean that even if they did everything perfectly, sacked all the SJWs and whatever, no organization can have this level of extreme extended failure, can bleed money at the rate that they have and survive, right? Like, they could do everything perfectly from this point.
yep,
Now, the question though is, well, what does that mean? Are you saying that Disney is going to cease to exist as an entity?
nope,
No, not exactly. I think what's going to happen is we're going to start to see very soon. and I mean in 2024, right? Like, because it has to be. There is no other option here. Uh, we're going to start to see Disney break up and significantly change into something very, very different than what it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and many years from now, when people talk about when did Disney die, they're going to point to 2023, right?
Yes.
In much the same way that people pointed to Odoacer in which am I pronouncing his name right, by the way? I
Odawasser.
have no idea. Odoacer. Okay. Odoacer. Uh like in much the same way that we look back at Odoacer and the as the end of the Western Roman Empire, we are going to look at 2023 in retrospect as the year that Disney died, because in order for them to quote unquote survive, we're going to need to see absolutely radical shifts in what they are. Like, for one thing, they're going to be sold, right? They have to be. They're not going to just completely disappear because they're too big, right? There's too much going on with them, but they will be sold. You know,
Mm.
they need money. That's just like, it's a fact. Uh
Right, like they spin off their uh, parks and whatnot, so that they're like they spin off the park so that it survives the death of its movie business or something.
yeah, that's true too. Um so the parks will last longer. I also think that even with like the current failure of the parks, I think it's more possible that they turn the parks around.
Yeah.
Uh
No, I mean like those things are successful and can be made successful pretty easily. They just,
they're not doing
pick
as
out the
well right now.
transsexuals running the princess booth. That's all.
So
That's all
here's
they
the
have
thing
to
about
do.
the parks nowadays. Like, my family, we went in the summer, and it's like if you had asked us did the parks look like they were doing bad to us, I would have said no. But then I would have thought for a moment and said, "You want to know something? We went in July, right, or
Hmm.
end of June, right? The last time we had went was 5 years earlier in November, and it was probably about as crowded there in June, end of June, July, as it was when we were there in November. Now,
Mm.
bless you. My brother sneezed in the background. Uh, to us, it's like, oh, well, it looks pretty crowded. But then I stopped and thought for a moment. It's like, wait a minute. It's as crowded in the heart of summer as it was in November. Like, that's really not very good if you're Disney,
Hmm.
right? Like, so there are signs, and there's also just the fact that like 5 years ago we went and the parks had a system called Fast Pass. This is important. I know that this sounds like why are you talking about this? But this is actually important when you talk about like what's going on with Disney. Fast Pass is great. Everybody loves it. No, I've literally never heard anybody complain about it. You sign up and you get to skip the line a ride. You could do this with whatever rides you want. It's free, right? It's just first come, first serve. You schedule a time. It's awesome. Uh, right. It allows you to get through the park at a reasonable time. Disney likes it because it incentivizes people to stay around the parks because you're scheduling a time. The customers like it because they don't need to wait in line. It was a win-win for everyone. Well, some bigwig at Disney decided they weren't making enough money off of this. So they changed the Fast Pass system to something they called Genie Plus. And this is an absolute disaster of a system that everybody hates. For
Mm.
one thing, Fast Pass is no longer like, you pay a small fee and you do it. Now it's like each ride costs a different amount of money. You first need to pay to use Genie Plus, which is not cheap, somewhere in the 20 something dollar range. And then you need to pay for each individual ride that you want to use. And the rides will be more or less expensive depending on the ride. So if it's a high in demand ride, it's going to be very expensive to use. And this, as you can imagine, now is way, way more expensive, way, way less convenient for everyone. There's
Hmm.
also the fact that Genie Plus has this thing where they go, oh, we will recommend you, right, like places that are less crowded during the day to encourage you to go there. Well, someone on YouTube did, I forget who, or I would tell you, link it to them. You can find this very easily. did an analysis of this, and they found something really actually disturbing, which is that Genie was lying about what was more or less crowded. In reality, what Disney was doing was trying to shuttle people over to less used attractions in the park to try and make them more money. Like it had
Right.
nothing to do with if it was less crowded or more crowded or whatever. Like literally there was no correlation. There was a strong correlation with what wasn't doing very well and what did they need people to visit in order to get it to do better. Well, fans, so this is like the new park experience. It's really bad. Now, I will give you the disclaimer that when I visited Disney World, I had a great time. The rides were all running, right? The lines moved at a fine pace. There was nothing that would have stuck out to you as particularly like, oh man, this park is dying, right?
Mm.
Like, it wasn't obvious like that. It was just little cracks that if you looked were starting to show, right? Like
Right.
little things, subtle things. The Indiana Jones show is a very famous show at Disney World. When I went there 5 years ago, I loved it. Well, I went there again this year and it was changed. In the original version of the show, they used to have audience interaction. They would call people up. It would be like you were on the set of an Indiana Jones movie and they would go through a scene from the movie and they would have the audience play the extras. The audience no longer play the extras. Right? Like they got rid of that, presumably due to COVID. But COVID's gone now and they just never changed it back, which shows lack of quality control, right? Somebody's
Yeah.
not paying attention. You know, you easily could have changed it back to the older, better version of the show, and you just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, this is something that if you weren't there, you wouldn't notice because the show itself is still good, right? Like, it's still a fun show. You know, I still would recommend it, but it used to be better. And they
Yes.
did the same thing. They have a Finding Nemo musical. The Finding Nemo musical, there's another great video on this you can find. I don't know the guy, but if you just look it up, it's actually pretty good. It's an original musical by the people who did like Avenue Q, uh, which is, the Muppet comedy, right? If you've never heard of
Yes.
it, which is which is amusing, whatever. But like it's well made, is what I mean. Like these are real names that wrote it and did it. When we saw it 5 years ago, it's fantastic. It's really good. We saw it now. It's the same music. It's still good. The costumes are still good, right? The singers still good, but they vastly shortened an already very short show,
Mm.
and it's not as good. And would you notice this if you hadn't seen the original show? You probably wouldn't. But it's just these small things you see, like crack here and there, starting to show, the seams starting to show, the magic starting to disappear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what's gonna happen with the parks? Well, I think the parks, unlike the movies, like Disney Entertainment is, for all intents and purposes, dead. If it's going to survive, it will need to be sold off and changed into something completely different, right? Like that's the only thing that can happen at this point. And it will. That will happen because it's too much money to be left on the table. But nevertheless, you're going to be looking at something that is entirely different from what Disney used to do, right? Like and
Mm-hmm.
used to be. The parks on the other hand, I think will survive with one exception. I would not be surprised, and I hate to say this because I love this park, if Animal Kingdom went under. Like Animal Kingdom has always been the most, it's the newest park and it's always been the most expensive park to run because of the animals. It
Yes.
closes the earliest. And if Disney is going to think about cutting costs, I would very much not be surprised if Animal Kingdom went under. I would be sad about this. I love Animal Kingdom. It has my favorite ride in Disney World, which is Expedition Everest. Right? I love the safari. I love a lot of Animal Kingdom. But when Disney is in that, like, I don't think people realize this. Disney is in that state where they're going to need to seriously think about these sorts of hard decisions. Like, cutting employees and cutting on the margins is not going to cut it. They had a catastrophically bad year, like, a historically bad year, one of the worst years for a business ever.
Mm. Like I did see an article where it was like businesses have lost um, $5 trillion, ESG businesses, and it's like, huh, $5 trillion. That's pretty amazing. We can get those rookie numbers up, can't we? Come on, guys. We can get those numbers up as high as we can. Anthony, are you there? Are you okay? They got him,
No,
guys.
no, I'm here.
They got
What's
him.
up?
Nothing. I'm kidding. Well, it's like I read an article where it was like ESG businesses have lost $5 trillion because of those nasty consumers who don't know what's good for them. Um,
It's yeah, that's the other thing too, where it's like there is an analogy here to everybody thinks it will last forever, right? And that's the same with the US government. Now, you do have the Vox Days of the world going 2030 or whatever, it's going to collapse, right? Like, I forget what his current number is, like
2033,
2030.
but maybe sooner.
Yeah. Right.
It's a
Like, it's all going to
reasonable number
collapse.
compared to some.
Now, is that true? I
Mm.
mean, to be honest, who knows?
Yeah,
Uh, like even Vox admits just because I got this particular year right doesn't mean I was actually right because there's so much you know like there's so many variables here. It could just be a coincidence. He's like, with that said, remember who predicted it. uh and
I am
will
of the opinion that he's optimistic, but I trust his opinion over some guys like China is collapsing. And it's like, buddy, you've been making this exact same video for the last 3 years. Like, if China's going to collapse, it's going to collapse. But it's like, you know,
look, the other thing too is yeah, I'm trying to think of how to put it. The other thing too is that once, just like with the collapse of Disney, the collapse of the US government is not going to be what people expect. It's not going to be the
yeah,
entire collapse of the government. Like, it's not like the United States will cease to exist as an entity.
right.
Rather, it's going to be a transformation into something that will technically be continuous, but in
Yep.
reality be something completely different.
There
Right?
is,
I
this is
don't
going to
know what
sound
that will mean.
right. Like, I'm going to tell people this. Like, there were people in the Roman Empire who did not know the Roman Empire had fallen in their lifetimes. Like people in Hispania, even if they were ruled directly by like the Visigoths or something, they were still, pretending to be Roman. So it's like, yeah, we could have like a revolution of the colonels or something, or, um, like the Republic is just done. They're done pretending. That's also a choice. You could have, like, something ridiculous like Tony Blair taking over, the Dark Lord, on all these other things like that. Uh, and who knows how it will look. Like the reason why people like nowadays are debating the end date of the Roman Empire is because information's out, that shows that yes, people didn't know. you know, not everyone knew the Roman Empire was gone. Even though I do believe that my personal choice of Odoacer rejecting the imperial regalia uh, is a better date than some. There's still the question of okay, so what does it mean when Justinian took over? When Belisarius took Rome for Justinian, what does it mean? Well, what about all the emperors who never set foot in Rome during their emperorship, some of which lasted 20 years? Um, or less likely, not that long. Um, Romulus Augustulus was not in Rome when he was deposed. He was in Ravenna. Most of the barracks room emperors ruled from Mediolanum. Uh, what does that mean for, the American Empire? Does that just mean we're back down to sort of like the contiguous U.S.? I'm not going to pretend that, Cascadia and Ozarkia and all these other things are going to suddenly exist. Partially because there isn't any like ruling class ready to take over, but also because like in the end, the government is still pretty in charge of things. Even if most like police officers and stuff like that are like not going to, um, you know, they say anyway that they're a certain way. You can't guarantee that um, there's going to be any sort of quote unquote revolution. uh, if
Hmm.
anything happens, it's going to happen in Washington, D.C. And maybe some people will be, Hitler in the Fuhrer bunker about things. But quite frankly, most people isn't, it's me, maybe the economy gets worse or maybe the economy gets better, but I sure don't have any power over it. Uh, I can barely decide where I can find a job that pays more than that. And or buying a house or anything like that. Like I'm not in a position, to be a revolutionary about these sort of things. I'm just some dude on the internet saying stuff that'll get his channel banned. So like temper your expectations, I guess, for those who might be going for it. I believe Vox is right in the
Yes.
sense of like uh, there's probably going to be a government change around that time, but I'm not going to pretend like it's going to be better. And he's never acted like it's going to be better than what we got now.
No, of course not. But this is kind of my point, though. Like, and I don't mean to pick on our wonderful mod Bradford, where he goes, "Collapse. Vox is optimistic." Well, no, he's not, and
Oh,
uh,
and
he's not optimistic. And the fact that you don't think there will be a collapse is kind of my point, right?
right,
Like, it can never happen to us. Yes, it can. It can, and it will.
yep.
Uh,
I mean, it's
it
like
hasn't happened, but it can happen.
I live in St. Louis, but at the same time, like the worst of anything is probably going to happen in Washington D.C. But St. Louis has FBI headquarters, Federal Reserve headquarters, not the Federal Reserve headquarters, but headquarters for a very large area around us. Um, like other places like Chicago are going to get worse, but at the same, and they are getting worse day by day. Uh, but it's like how do I want to put it? Like, if you're living in the absolute middle of nowhere and you're not doing anything to get you noticed, like Ruby Ridge, no one's going to bother you. You're absolutely right. Maybe it's harder to get soda at your local grocery store. But at the same time, if you're living in a city, things aren't going to end very well for you. Um, it's kind of like how the Goths destroyed some cities and the Huns destroyed other cities. And, we got plenty of barbarians inside our gate right now. Um, and quite frankly, like studying how the Roman Empire brought people in, they were literally settling them in places where, the entire countryside was denuded of people due to plague. Like there were places in Gaul that had absolutely zero people. What do you do with that farmland? You need farmers. Guess what? You don't have the population anymore who can do it. You drag in some Goths or Franks or Suevi or whoever. Like there's a reason why everyone describes us like the Roman Empire. But it's like like us looking at all these cultural things going on and collapsing are just, no different than the emperor throwing out one circus master to be eaten by his own lions, and then appointing his favorite to appoint to it, even if he's worse. Like there's no rhyme or reason, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's only the choice that we can make, which is to serve the Lord. Um, in the end, you have to follow your own conscience concerning Netflix, concerning movies and stuff like that. And things like Miyazaki films, there's no real problem. Like morally, Miyazaki is very upright, but it is my understanding that Disney has the distribution on all of Miyazaki's films. Uh, and that I could be wrong on this, but it is my belief that Disney has the thing. And so let's say you pay $10. Well, 50 cents is going to Disney or something like that. And I'm not using this to castigate you, Anthony, in particular. I'm just saying this as, what we can expect. There's also the fact
It
of,
is, but I think that's the difference in the point where it's like, okay, if you're going to support something where it's like, yeah, some of your ticket is going to go to them, but you're not giving it specifically to them, if that makes sense.
right.
By the way, currently, I think the distributor, it was Disney.
Yeah,
Now it is G Kids, but
really.
I don't know if they're owned by Disney right now. Let me see. They might be at the moment.
Yeah.
No, no, now, yeah, they got the rights to release, so it's no longer Disney,
Huh.
actually.
Nice.
It was for a while, but now it's G Kids. So there you go. You can feel a little better about yourself.
Yeah.
But
But you
even if they didn't,
yeah.
yeah, I think that there is a difference between I'm gonna pay to support this movie by a filmmaker I enjoy that is a foreign film that Disney distributes, where it's like, okay, yeah, Disney might get like 20% or something of my ticket, but in the end, when you're interacting with the world, probably someone is getting some percentage of what you're doing. You know, there's a
Mm,
difference between that and I'm going to give my money directly to them.
right. Like it's like when I say like I mean what I mean is the spiritual is more important than the explicit physical in this stuff. Like you are not harmed, and the people around you are likely not harmed by a Miyazaki film. But then there's films, like say Sleepless in Seattle, which has some weird scenes in it that, quite frankly, I've always felt very disturbed by. That
Which
I
movie?
Sleepless in Seattle.
Never seen it.
Yeah. There's a scene where she like fakes a an orgasm in a restaurant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's famous.
Yep. So it's like that is spiritual dog meat. Do not see Sleepless in Seattle. It is clearly a way to open a door into eviler things of a sexual nature. It also has weird themes about like how you should interact, how important love is in your life. You know, love is incredibly important, but the behaviors they have are toxic. It promotes toxicity. There is spiritual danger in Sleepless in Seattle. I have no idea why I brought up Sleepless in Seattle. Maybe that's important to the commissar who's putting me on another watch list. Uh, you know, you look at that stuff. You cannot say it's a Christian film, uh, but you can't say Miyazaki's film is going to be Christian either. You look at stuff that Angel Studios is making, and you can say those are pretty Christian films compared to the normal stuff. And I do like the fact that that movie you saw, Shift, is basically Rick and Morty with realistic morals. Uh,
Yes.
uh, you know, he
Neil
didn't.
McDonough is just Rick. I can
Yeah.
honestly see Rick and Morty doing a parody of this movie.
Did he ever say that he was in a pickle?
Oh, no.
Oh, then they missed out. No, it was the right move not to make any modern references. But like there's a hierarchy to these things, and the level to hell is closer than you think. It's pretty clear after studying things like the moral panic of the 90s and 80s and stuff like that. That yeah, maybe D&D wasn't the problem, but they should have been panicking, and they should have been panicking a lot more. I have my own theory of the spiritual crisis of the 1970s, which was very clear that there were many Hindu priests who had white American specifically students who spread around throughout America and spread cults. These cults led to the deaths of many, many people. Spiritual death. millions of people, even if they weren't directly killed by guys like Ravi Baba and others, were um, sent to hell. And it is directly because of their fault. There is literally a chain of causation that you can trace with your own eyes through, of all things, Wikipedia articles of who was whose student, how many students they have, and how many students they had going forward. Some of which had more than six figures. You know, it just like it's one of those things where I can't even bear to study it as much as I should, just because it's like, oh wow, this is, and it's like I just keep digging deeper in how evil it is. Uh, so it's like the issue is more complex than just will the USA or Disney or whatever collapse by X year. Disney does need to restructure if it wants to live. The US also needs to restructure if it wants to live. Personally, I await a Caesar. I await the great man that God will raise up to conquer us and put us to the boot and become true emperor so that we can finally stop pretending and lying about elections. But I'm a crazy man who stays in his room and doesn't like to interact with people. Um, you know, I tell stories of personal interactions to my family that I think are very funny. And they just look at me in shock and horror. And it's like, wait, you bullied a girl until she went on a diet? Yeah, and she looks beautiful now. Ben, no. It's not like she was a Christian, but it's like you look at these things, these feral existences of myself that is as a bouncer, and I just see it repeated across everyone at all times. I've been told stories by Anthony, by Ken, by quite frankly everyone, um, of verbal and physical savagery that quite frankly is uncalled for. Our best hope is in Christ. Our best hope for our nation is that God raises somebody up who, or a group of people up, that's fine too, even though oligarchies suck as a rule, or God breaks us apart so that we're ruled by people like us. Like that's the best choice we have because we can't keep living like this. Maybe Disney is just a sign of things to come. But at the same time, I dread to think how many suicides will happen if Disney just collapses and disappears from existence. How many people are completely dependent on Disney to be, Mickey Mouse is the Pope. Um, you know, we talked about, in the end, you could say that the Roman Empire never fell because the Roman Catholic Church still exists. But also, I can say that Satan's kingdom, even though its power is broken and we have salvation from hell uh, through the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ as a free gift, um, Satan's kingdom is still on Earth, and quite frankly, having Mickey Mouse as a satanic pope is not something that is so far fetched as to be unbelievable. Um, you didn't see any goat sacrifices while you were in Disneyland, did you, Anthony?
No, they hide it very well.
Oh, okay.
It's uh it's all behind the scenes.
Just like your brother or sister or whatever like goes down into the caverns underneath Disneyland, come up white faced, shaken.
Are you kidding? I feel like they're gonna come up and they're gonna be like gung ho Disney and very optimistic. And
Wow.
I'm just gonna be like, you okay? And go, yeah, what? What's the problem? And that's
There's a
just
pit, and the goats fall into the pit, and I am a goat, Anthony. I am a goat as anyone else, and I go into the pit, and I've come out again. And you know what, Anthony? We need to buy another Disney princess dress and a lightsaber, and we need to hit the gift shop, Anthony. We need to clear out the gift shop. You got a credit card, right, Anthony? We need to clear out this gift shop.
that's how Disney works.
Exactly.
Uh anyway, I think that that's a good spot to end it. The Holocaust was real, but only about half of the people who died in it were Jewish. Have a good night, everyone.
Unironic.